Welcome back, JP. One of my favourite times of the week. It's a Thursday at 12:30, which means that you and I, for an hour, can have a wee chat about Celtic. It's a Celtic State of Mind. You're back. You're back in Glasgow. How was your trip back to Seville?
Uh,
Almost 20 years on.
it was great. I think I was maybe being a bit optimistic to think I would have time to go and visit the ground where we played. It would have been nice, but it was a 3 day wedding, so it was kind of like full on activities from Thursday through till Saturday really, and then I was back home and I was back to Malaga on Sunday morning, which is where I watched the game on a train, and I had no reason to embarrass myself this time because I just sat in sort of stony silence as I watched events unfold in Paisley from afar
Nothing
as
to
I
cheer about.
as I went through the Andalusian mountains. But I know Seville was great, and the place that the wedding took place was one of the most beautiful locations I've ever been to for anything. Never mind a wedding, but it was just kind of like a kind of botanical garden with a really nice house. And I think Dave's wife found it a while ago, maybe like 3 years ago, and in the time since, it's been featured in a pretty prominent wedding magazine. So it's kind of blown up as a kind of destination. Oh, that's a good place to go and get married. So
Yeah,
they've put the price up accordingly, but they've had it locked in at the price that they found it at. So it's
fair play.
pretty fly. And yeah, it's really, really, really nice place. And I think it's become like a kind of Instagrammable wedding affair, where people like to show off the wedding, whereas, it was a lot of down to earth people that were there that I was with. Met some really nice people, including a script writer and a producer from Hollywood, which isn't who you expect to be sitting talking to at a wedding. But very interesting people and very nice people as well.
What I love about you doing your travels, JP, and the people that you meet, obviously in your job, but also in your kind of personal life, because you like travelling about, is just you'll be one of these people that spread the word on Celtic, and then you see pictures of like Kiefer Sutherland popping up with a Celtic jersey on, and Danny Glover and all that holding up the Celtic stuff. You're one of those guys, man. You're spreading the good word of
Well,
Celtic.
I say that there was a drinks thing on the Thursday night, and I met the bride's father, and I was standing talking to him. Really nice guy from like a Londoner, basically, and no skin in the game up here. And we were chatting away, and we were talking about how nice it was to be in Seville and everything else. And I says, "Oh, I came here a long time ago to watch my football team," and he was just like, "Oh, you're Celtic," and he was like, "Oh, Dave's Rangers, isn't he?" I was like, "How does that work?" And I was like, "Well, we make it work." I don't get in touch with him if Celtic win against Rangers. I don't get in touch with him, and he doesn't get in touch with me. But we're really good pals. But he mentioned we were talking about the number of guests that were going to be at the wedding, and Dave, his name is Dave, said, "Yeah, I think it's 50, 55 that's going to be here." And I went, "He's never specifically made it 55 guests." And then I had to I explained everything about the last few years or the last 10 years. And then Dave used that in his speech, to wind my pal Dave up about the guests, the wedding numbers. And they brought it up. He said, "So Dave's a Rangers boy," and I booed during the speech. It was one of those ones where you could feel comfortable enough and I'd met everybody by that point anyway, and so I booed Rangers as they were mentioned in the speech.
It's a lovely link. Talking to Celtic fans booing, we will get on to some other issues along those lines. But you know what? We want to keep it nice and light as well. JP, it's International Week. You've got the Scotland jersey hanging up behind you. Are you into the internationals? I mean, I know a lot of fans are into club football first and foremost, and they have maybe a alliance with international football. What's your take on it? I see you've got the jersey there. Were you watching with interest last night?
I mean, I got a bit of it. I was straight back into work last night, working at Tuts. Incidentally, I should mention the band that were on second were called Happy 2000. They're named after a Chinese takeaway in Southampton. True story. And the singer appeared side the stage with remember would it be 17, 18 away top? You know, the green, the 2 shades of green, the hoops.
Yes.
With the gold sponsor and the gold logo.
Yeah.
He appeared with a very battered version of that strip, quite tight on him as well. And I was like, and he had a See You Jimmy hat on and shades. And I was like, where's this come from? Because he was just wearing normal clothes up until that point. He went, oh, the guy that's doing merch for us asked him if he had a Celtic top because I wanted to wear a Celtic top on stage. It's our first gig in Glasgow. And I'm a Celtic fan. And I was like, what? And I never got chatting to him too much afterwards. I meant to ask him how he became a Celtic fan. But he came on stage and after the first song, he just went, it's great to be in Glasgow. Come on, you boys in green. I was like, oh my God. Do you realise that doesn't necessarily fly at a neutral venue? But
it might not land. The way that you think.
There's no glass allowed in the venue. So, the worst he was going to get was a pint. A plastic pint, but he actually got quite a big cheer. So,
meanwhile, I'm writing down Happy 2000 and must get them in for a session, right?
They're a bit kind of like an electro idols,
right?
That's what I described them as. They were good, but I didn't get to see the Scotland game. In answer to your question, because I was working, and you can't just sit and watch a 90-minute football match while you're running a gig. You could, but it's not very. It's not very PC to be just digging in your job. So I watched a bit of it. I saw a couple of goals, and yeah, I honestly, I probably wouldn't have been there had I not been working. Because I do like to go to Scotland games. I went to Scotland games when I was a wee guy with my dad, and especially when there's a lot of players in the team that you kind of like. There's a lot of ex-Celtic players, current Celtic players.
Yeah,
and players of a Celtic persuasion that are maybe elsewhere. Your John McGinns and whatnot. So
I know.
Good finish from him. Good finish from him. So
absolutely, he used the old Kenny Dalglish backside trick where he would just take a guy out of the game just with one move of the butt cheek. Well done, John McGinn. We'll not get into what could have been. I want to get as many comments in as possible. But as I say, we'll have a few wee light-hearted stabs at a few things, JP, where I want to hear your take on it. I want to hear the opinions of those in the comment section. John Hill is looking forward to another great Celtic talk. Great work, lads. Yeah, we know that it is the international break, but there's always loads to talk about. And the fact that JP and I only get together once a week to do it means we can talk about everything that everybody else has spoken about already and put our take on it as well. Robert Davey, afternoon all from Dublin. Now, I don't want to mispronounce the village or town or city that he's living in there.
I think it might be the weather. Just a guess. It might be
rainy.
It
rainy?
Aye.
Rainy. Oh, there you go. That makes sense, mate. Thank you for keeping me right. Kevin Graham, poet, afternoon comrades. And Kevin was on yesterday with John Hughes. Very enjoyable show, actually. But I'm going to throw in my first name drop. What are we now? We're under 10 minutes. JP, but I watched the Kevin Graham and John Hughes show yesterday. Well, I should actually say I listened to it while I was driving home. When they were live, I was in Glasgow. I had to meet somebody in Glasgow, which will lead me on to my next bit. And I'm going to drop the name. I'm going to do it. It's not somebody I know, but I'm just sitting there chatting away to somebody who tunes in. I won't name him, but he knows who he is. He tunes into Acsom, having a good chin wag about Celtic, of course. And he says to me, he said, Simon Ferry and Charlie Mulgrew kick about around here, and they often go into that wee cafe there for a cup of tea and stuff like that. Literally 30 seconds later, Simon Ferry bounces up the street. He comes right over and gives us a big handshake and says well done to what we're doing, which I thought was just a touch of absolute class from Simon Ferry. Ex-Celt, of course, now doing brilliantly with open goal and Broomhill and all that kind of stuff as well, JP. Touch of class, Simon Ferry, just bouncing along Ingram Street in Glasgow.
What they did, I wasn't there. I probably would have gone if I wasn't working. It was just in the middle of a run of insane gigs. But what they did doing that at the Hydro, that's
unreal.
That's mental.
Crazy levels.
Take what they've been doing just as a pod, just like this, and then taking that to the Hydro. I mean, just the clip of Charlie Mulgrew trapping the ball from the crowd is, I mean, it's just joyous. Have you seen that?
No, I've not seen it. I've not seen that.
I think a ball comes from the audience. It's quite a height. I don't know if they've kicked balls out into the crowd or something like that, but Charlie Mulgrew just watches it and just brings it down on his foot and lets it land on his foot, and they all go absolutely mental on the stage because he's done that on the stage at the Hydro in front of 13,000 people or whatever. So
you're right though, it is sensational, particularly coming from someone like yourself who's in the industry and would know how much work behind the scenes would need to go into something that size, right? And they've done it twice.
It's something that, I mean, I have to be honest, when I saw that they'd gone to the Hydro, I was like, no way. That the knowledge that I have from working in the industry, you're kind of thinking, no way is that going to, even get half full. It's not something that you can just do at the flick of a switch. Is just translate a podcast audience into a live audience in an arena. I know. They've obviously tapped in. They must have known with their analytics and their figures, that there was a possibility that they could do it. So otherwise, they would have lost a hell of a lot of money because it's not cheap to hire the Hydro.
I bet. I mean, no, fair play. But even when you think about it, the two characters that constantly got spoken about on the show leading up to the live events were Gravison and Di Canio. And all the stories that were attached to them. So if you were ever to write the script and say, well, we're going to take this live, that's the two people you would have wanted to see. And I know a lot of Celtic fans don't like Di Canio for his politics, totally get that. But under the circumstances of Open Goal operating as they were operating, they're the two guys that you thought to yourself, if they could put them on a stage, they might just be able to do this. But absolutely superb. Simon Ferry, I do remember Willie McStay, my second name drop, saying to me one time that Simon was one of the best young players he ever saw coming through at Celtic, but then he had a really bad injury, I think, in his teenage years, and that stumped his development a bit.
I remember his name, I guess, when would it be that he was on the periphery of the Celtic team? What years?
Well, he was part of that. Remember the Wembley Cup team? With McCourt and Samaras and all these guys. He was part of that team. He was part of that team, which would have been Tony Mowbray.
2009 then, yeah.
Tony Mowbray. So that would have been his time. Yeah,
you always you're always been aware of players that are in the wings, youth players. So I remember, Mark Antony and Mark Burchill and Barry John Corr, all these guys that you if you were that into Celtic, you would be aware of the
Celtic View in the programme. Yeah,
the reserve games or the whatever setup it was back then. It probably was reserves, wasn't it?
Yeah,
there was reserves for that whole time. So, when Simon Ferry was one you would see prominently, and there would be sort of reports about him, being somebody that would be on the verge of getting into the first team. So it's not really surprising to find out that he was highlighted by Willie McStay.
And the thing is, if you look back far enough, Charlie Mulgrew, who was one of the guys, JP, who was at Celtic from a very young age, used to go by the name Chaz. Chaz Mulgrew. Honestly, if you look at the Celtic views.
So 80s. Charlie Mulgrew is an 80s guy living in he's an analog guy living in a digital world. I think he's totally like the type of guy that you'd see out at clubs in the 80s wearing slip-on shoes and a thin leather tie, that kind of...
He could probably still pull that off, mate.
I know, they definitely could. He's a character indeed. But and he's now a meme. He's now a meme. You see Charlie Mulgrew's face on Twitter daily these days where just you made that up. And the interview where he's you're raging, That's honestly, I see that all the time on my Twitter feed. Is Charlie Mulgrew.
It's something else, isn't it? It's absolutely superb. But seeing how we're getting all nostalgic, this should lead us on to a wee picture I'm going to share with you, JP, right? And I know how much you love your Celtic history as well, right? There's a little picture of what I think is a completed collection, right? Get the anoraks out, ladies and gentlemen. I think that's a completed collection of the old VHS archive that obviously was very popular in the 80s and 90s, not so much 2000s, although there are quite a few in there from kind of Martin O'Neill's time. So it's actually taken me quite a while. First lockdown started like gathering up what I had, JP. There's a whole reason for this. And then asking people, because there was no definitive list, to try and get a list together. So I was in Glasgow picking up the last few copies. And we have done a show on the channel called the Acsom Video Retrospective, I think it's called. I should know. The Acsom Retro Video Club, there you go. And we started off by doing the Celtic Collection Volume 1 and Volume 2 that you'll see second row for the top on the left-hand side. So what I'm saying to yourself, JP, and those watching us today, about 400 watching at the moment, which video should we do next, right? So we don't just upload the video onto YouTube. What we do is a retrospective, like a review, and we pick out the good, the funny, the embarrassing bits from the video, and we discuss them on the show. And at the end, we talk about, was it good, bad, or ugly, right? Because, I mean, as you'll see there, a lot of these videos were coming out in the kind of 1980s and 1990s, and we were harking back to the 1960s because there was nothing else to talk about. But there's some belters in there, JP. Is there any that catches your eye that you think we should cover next?
Aye, the Celtic 88-89 video that's kind of third down. You see it?
Yeah, I do.
The one next to the Martin O'Neill exclusive. I remember getting that in a charity shop. I can actually see on that video it's still got the sticker that says $9.99.
That's incredible. Yeah.
I'll probably get it from like Our Price or something like that. But
HMV, yep.
I had that from a charity shop maybe about, I don't know, a couple of years later. So it was like one of the sort of first Celtic videos that I had to watch that I owned, you know, not stuff, because I used to tape stuff off the telly all the time, all the highlights, sports scene and Scott Sport and all of that. And any full televised games that were on, I would tape the whole game, you know, a European game or something like that. I've got the whole Croatia Zagreb game taped off the telly, you know, with Prozinecki. I know that's a bit later, but I mean, I was still, even at 19, was still taping games off the telly because I'm a geek. But that one there, and that was actually the first season I saw a Celtic game, 88-89. I think I was at the first home game of that season against Hamonakis, so another reason why my eyes go to it immediately. But other ones, the 5-1 game, watched that over and over and over again, the 5 Star Boys.
Oh, yes.
That was because Mark Burchill, I mean, well, it was because we hammered them, but it was also because Mark Burchill scored, and, you know, I'd gone to school camp with him and knew him and stuff like that. So, like, to actually know somebody that scored against Rangers it blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. So that as well, and I don't know, the treble, Martin O'Neill treble video as well.
Yes.
I replaced that with the DVD. I had that on video, but I've got the DVD now. I like the obscure ones as well, like where did I see one? I saw one that was pretty random from the past. What's the Celtic Files? What's that? I don't think I've ever seen them.
Well, I'll tell you what, it must have been pretty popular, right? Because there's 2 covers, so they've sold it the first run and they've redone it. So the 2 of them are sitting together down there. There are quite a few in this collection I've never watched yet, JP, and that's one of them. That is one of them.
Because you can see, it looks like Larsson and Blinker on the cover with Janssen.
Wim Janssen's on there as well. And then you've got things like Lord of the Wing, which is an incredible documentary. Unbelievable documentary.
That's great. I've seen that.
Is it Jamie Dolan, the director who recently did the documentary on the Celtic supporters, where he interviewed the Albanian president and all these guys? It was the same guy that did that, Lord of the Wing. Brilliant, superb. And then you've got other ones that are narrated by McIlvanney, the official history, and some of them are narrated by Tony Roper and Billy Connolly.
McIlvanney's voice is
it's brilliant. Paul Sheridan does a brilliant McIlvanney.
Does he?
He does.
Oh, no, he does. I've heard him do it. Yeah, he did it in the car on the way through to do that strip thing. But I heard it was one of the videos that Lil Z shared on Twitter the other day, and it had the commentary was from. It was Celtic done United. It was the 1-0 game in the Scottish Cup. League Cup, 1994. It was my first trip to Hampden, and John Collins scored with about 4 minutes to go, bent one into the top corner. And then on the wee clip that Little Z shared, that had like Tommy Burns being interviewed afterwards, and he was talking about how the fans were starting to trust the team more, because they could see what was happening with the team. And he said, "But this is a process." He kind of said, in not so many words, "This is a process. It's going to take time." And then it cuts to John Collins, and he's got the thinnest, tightest tie on you ever seen in your life, a huge collar and this tiny little tie that just disappears into the shirt collar. And he's standing next to a car, because remember, he used to have cars at the side of the pitch.
That's right. Yeah.
Were they like, why were they there? Why did you have cars at the side of the pitch? Were they for sale? Was it a prize?
Was it an advertising?
Maybe somebody, some boffin can tell us, hopefully. But if somebody does say that, bring that up, because I want to know. I want to know why there was cars at the side of the pitch. But the commentary was from Jock Brown, and regardless of any wrongdoings that Jock Brown did at Celtic, his voice for me is synonymous with games of my childhood. Totally. And his voice just sounds brilliant commentating. You should have stuck to that instead of getting...
It takes you back, JP, doesn't it? His voice, Archie McPherson, dare I say, Jerry McNeid commentated on a lot of games back then as well. And it just takes you right back. By the way, these are the official videos. They're not all released by Celtic, but I've also been given big boxes of the ones taped off the telly, JP, that are going to take me months to get through as well. So who knows what I'm going to unearth on these tapes as well.
I would 100% on a rainy day be up for coming through and sitting, watching these highlights. If it's highlights packages from the telly, Celtic games from the 90s, that would be fantastic. Because I've got about, 5-6 videos, maybe more, of stuff taped off the telly, but that's only a snapshot. It's from mainly from seasons 93, 94, 95. That was when I was properly taping everything,
You take everything you can, interviews, the whole lot. A couple of them as well. I will move on, but please tell me what you think should be the next video that we do the retrospective on. One of them was Celtic action from the 60s, great Celtic action from the 60s, then more great Celtic action from the 60s. And I read in one of the fanzines of the time, not the View I think it was, which said that some guy, I don't know who it was, found the tape reels in a skip outside one of the TV studios in Glasgow, swiftly took them home, realised there was no rights to the content, so decided to... These games are pretty rare. I don't know if they're on YouTube, and Lil Z's maybe used them, but anyway, we're going to work our way through these, including the Ian Rush testimonial, which finished Liverpool 6, Celtic 0. That'll be an interesting show on that occasion. But there's loads of absolutely brilliant footage within these. Interestingly, one final point, there's a front cover with Tommy Coyne on it, third from the bottom in the middle. And that was like a free video that was given out to something called the Celtic Family that you had to register with, JP, right? So this wasn't for sale. I don't know what's on it, right? But on the back cover, it advertises all the Celtic videos that are for sale. And it says coming soon, and advertises 2 videos that were never released. Because by the time, obviously, they came round to release them, I think the old board had been binned. So the plans were shelved. But it's interesting that these 2 videos were in the works, and you just wonder how far in production they were in. They simply were never released. So there we go.
Tommy Coyne was about 7 or 8 rows in front of me in Seville.
Is that right?
Game. Aye. I think I don't know if he's got kids, but he was definitely there with, a couple of younger guys and another guy. So maybe it was his brother and his kids or something like that. But it was definitely Tommy Coyne. So.
One of his sons did play professional football, senior football, so it might have been him. Sorry for digressing, that's what JP and I do, just talk to us about nostalgia.
To be fair, you can't, if there's anybody got the knives out in the comments, as they often do, you can't really grumble. We're talking about Celtic
nostalgia. So JP wants 88-89 season review. On the front cover of that, by the way, was Anton Rogan. What do you want in the comments? Let me know, because we will do what is the most requested video, and we'll keep this series up. Tobago Street Police Station Celtic Supporters Club, there's a CSC for you. So very fortunate to have Ange Postecoglou steering the good ship Celtica. That is probably a reference to the title, and I know that it was spoken about by Kevin and John yesterday in and around some of the press coverage, JP, in relation to Ange Postecoglou, his future, where he's going to go, and in the not too distant future, if you believe what you read. So Brighton were interested, Leicester were interested, etc., etc. And you know what, the whole thing, I think the narrative throughout this show could certainly be looking at the agenda of the press. And not every member of the press, I've got to say, but when you look at the stories around Ange Postecoglou leaving Celtic when he's just got started, the stories around some of the comments made by the likes of Graham Souness, Alan McCoist, in relation to Celtic's fan base. And let me just double check that he actually said this. Souness claims that Celtic fans are the unacceptable face of Scottish football. Wow, where do you start with that comment coming from him? I mean, Graham Souness, we know, what I would suggest anybody out there, and I'm pretty sure you've seen it, go on Twitter, have a look at Rangers' tax case. I think that nobody nails it any better than they have over the last few days in relation to Graham Souness and the hypocrisy of that man coming out.
Paragon of virtue, Graham Souness.
Wow. Unbelievable, JP. Now, I know that most people have had their say on this, but I've not spoken about it. I don't think you've had an opportunity to speak about it. Check out the Rangers tax case. Their tweet states, on the 17th of May 2001, Blackburn Rovers agreed to buy two guys from Rangers for 1.3 million. Around the same date, Rangers opened an EBT account for the Blackburn Rovers manager, Graham Souness. On the 13th of June 2001, while still manager at Blackburn, Souness requested 30k from his sub-trust. Now, that's just facts. You know, you can make out of that what you will, JP. But the fact is, Souness comes out and says it, but it's the way that it's then presented by the press. You know, the unacceptable face of Scottish football. And it's, for me, it's a disgrace that such a comment would even be given any kind of airtime. But because it has been, I think that Celtic fans are entitled to respond to that. For me, so we will. Absolutely. But for me, the unacceptable face of Scottish football is the anti-Irish racism that we see on a day-to-day basis, the anti-Catholic bigotry that we see on a day-to-day basis. And just yesterday, we've seen some footage of Kyle Lafferty.
Night to night, if you're going by nightclub footage.
Nightclub footage, exactly. And this exists every single day in Scottish society and in Scottish football. So the hypocrisy around Souness's comments left me, I wasn't surprised because we see it time after time after time. But that kind of narrative, you've just got to snuff it out, JP. It's a ridiculous comment for him to make.
Well, firstly, I don't know, what platform was he on? Was it TalkSport or something like that? I think it was TalkSport.
He was probably speaking or writing on a platform owned by Rupert Murdoch.
But it was definitely like a clip of it was a video clip of him talking with a microphone. So he must have been on a radio show or something like that. Was it with Jim White? Probably. We know where Jim White's loyalties lie, you know. And you immediately get sort of branded a moon howler or whatever if you start saying things that about, you know. Why did Souness respond to a question about that payment and said he was scouting for Europe, scouting in Europe for Rangers at that time? Well, why would he be doing that when he was the manager of another club?
Yep.
So I don't buy that at all. But I just think everybody wanted to have their pennies worth over this, and everyone wanted to create a narrative, and they've created that narrative. And well, you only need to look at the Scotland game last night. I didn't see the start of the game, but apparently the response to the you know, after this period of mourning, there was yet another occasion to display grief at this game last night. I just think it was, after what's going on, I was out of the country for the last 6 days, so I wasn't here for everything in the lead up to it and all the rest of it. But I just think it was a step too far, and that was obviously displayed vocally and loudly by the Scotland support last night. It's not Celtic, it's not Dundee United, it's not Hibs. It's clearly a divisive subject. The whole subject of monarchy and the royal family. not necessarily directed at one individual who has passed away. You know, it's about this whole institution. I think the graffiti on the wall at the Loudon Tavern said it all: £8 million for a funeral while our country starves. Where people are. I mean, how can you possibly justify that? That's madness. Anyway, that's an aside. But with regards to the video of Kyle Lafferty, I mean, I'm not surprised at all that was his response. I've seen that guy in a football pitch. I know what he has been like towards the Celtic fans when he's scored goals. And obviously, he gets it tight. There's no doubt about it. But when you know that that's living within him, and that's his response to that situation. I hate that, by the way. I hate that whole folk going up and getting videos and pretending to get a picture, and then it's a video, and then they say something, because it's happened to Celtic players. You've seen it. You know, Ralston got done, and Scott Brown, Chris Sire, Scott Brown's been done, and it's such wee guy patter. You know, I don't, regardless of what side it's on, but it's interesting to see the reactions of the players that it's happened to on our side, that they just go like that and walk away.
Aye.
You've maybe been trained to do that, but then you get a clown like Lafferty who comes out with that and then just gives them probably what they were looking for in the first place. Like I said, I don't agree with people going up to football players and doing that and like hoodwinking them. I think it's pretty bad patter, but I certainly don't agree with what was said in response to it. You know,
you're right. Now, apparently there's an internal investigation at Kilmarnock, JP, but what I want to hear is how the Scottish football authorities are going to deal with this. You know, because on the one hand, like you say, and we won't get into the monarchy question, because I think most people will realise what our thoughts are on it. JP, my biggest concern there is really democracy and dictatorship, and the thin line that seems to exist between the two. In this country, and that's something that has been brought under the spotlight over the last couple of weeks in relation to that, whereby you're not allowed to have an opinion on it that doesn't meet the narrative of the mainstream and the political opinion. So that's a concern, but again, that's maybe for another day on another podcast. But what you want to see is Lafferty investigated. You want him to be made an example of, and you know, because when the boot is on the other foot, as it were, they're only too happy to have their tuppence worth. JP, the likes of Souness, who I think was one of the worst coming out and saying that. But again, you've got a right to reply, and I think that sometimes as well, our club need to come out and respond to some of the comments that have been made to besmirch the good name of Celtic supporters.
By the way, people would maybe fling back at you the Lee Griffiths retort in the airport when someone said something to Lee Griffiths and he said back, "Your club's deed, mate," or "Beat it, your club's deed, mate." I mean, that is as maybe as to whether or not you would be like, oh, well, does somebody deserve to be hauled up in front of the SFA for making that comment to some guy that was being abusive to him in the airport? I don't necessarily think so. But if it was one of our players that had said, you know, orange bees or something like that back to somebody, I would be like, well, you need to rein that in. You can't be speaking to people like that, regardless of how much and how annoying it is when someone does something like that to you. You need to obviously have the self-discipline to bite your tongue and walk away, which is primarily what I've seen our players do in those situations. Show me. I mean, Scott Brown had somebody shout something about his sister.
Yeah.
Outside the Ibrox. He didn't respond with orange bees or F you or anything like that. He just kind of gave them a look as if to say, that's really bad. Like, and to be fair to quite a few of the Rangers, and that was filmed as well for effect, for the purpose of putting it online.
To fire it on social media. Yeah, it's pathetic.
And people around about, to be fair to them, a lot of folk were like, oh, that you've crossed the line, you know, like fellow Rangers fans who obviously have a moral compass,
some level of humanity,
to be like, no, you can't say that to somebody. That's horrendous. So, yeah, I mean that's my take on that.
I use the word pathetic, which leads me on to Piers Morgan. I mean, he called Celtic fans pathetic. JP, this is a man. Even the more well-known issues that he's created in his various roles in the newspaper industry, headhunted in his 20s by Rupert Murdoch. And some of the other lesser known stories about Morgan are worth investigating as well. You know, he's the guy that was who was taken to task by the then Prince Charles for glorifying an incident at Harry's school where he got injured during probably a game of polo or maybe rugby, I'm not sure which. And photographs and all that ended up in the paper, and it was seen as an intrusion of privacy, and he was slapped down at the time by Prince Charles, who obviously is the man now that he's trying to get a wee knighthood off of. That's about the only kind of motivation I can see from the likes of Morgan getting involved in the discussion. This is a guy who, there's loads of other stories, but you know what, I might end
the James Whale one. Did you see that?
Oh,
Where the guy just said, why did she mean so much to you, and why, explain it to me, and then the guy, he just lost it on air.
And the thing is, they can mute the person, so you don't have a right to reply, and then obviously they can say whatever they want to you, JP, and then they post it. They can't wait to post that on social media to get the pile on. You know what I mean? And it's just dreadful behaviour. I'll bring this up while I see it. Stevie Kenny, what date is the Gracie's thingy? That's a good question, because the Gracie's thingy, right, we have announced it, and we put out a wee post or two here or there on social media channels, JP, but it's virtually sold out. Virtually sold out. We haven't even got round to announcing who the guest is, but it's the 20th of January. But while we're on the subject, I'll come back to the VHS videos in a second, because there's quite a few comments coming in. Who should be the guest, JP? If you could see a guest with Acsom in Gracie's on the 20th of January, who should it be?
Roy Aitken.
Oh, good shout. There was never a VHS video made for Roy, was there?
Because I think he'd probably have really good stories. He's in that period of a crossover between Steen and... Is that right? Am I right in saying that?
Well, he made his debut the season that Steen was recuperating from his car crash. And that happened in 76, the car crash, I believe. 75, 76. So Aiken made his debut. He was the youngest ever Celtic at the time, 16.
Right. So I was right in thinking that then. That was just off the top of the dome. Yeah. But he's part of that. He's over, as a player, he oversaw a massive change in Celtic. And I think there would be a lot of... Well, I know he's obviously employed at Celtic now as an ambassador, so there might be limitations in what he can divulge as to how Stephen was treated by the club and everything else. But I suppose he could speak from a footballing aspect of how everything kind of changed in that time, and then watched Aberdeen and Dundee United become prominent forces, and how attitudes changed towards them as a club. Maybe this has all been aired, and I
don't think it has. I don't think he's done that much, has he? Really, in terms of media and stuff like that.
No, I mean, I suppose he doesn't really come across as the sort of gags guy or anything like that. But I think if you were to be, not to blow smoke up your proverbial, but if you were to be interviewing him, you would probably get out of him what I, as a viewer or audience member, would want to hear, just because you know your stuff about that time and everything else, because you've looked into it. Not that there's not loads of other people that know that as well, but if you're in a position to be able to speak to him about Celtic, then that's somebody that I would like to hear.
Would be brilliant. That's a great shout, JP. Roy Aitken, anybody else you would suggest? Let us know in the comment section. It's the 20th of January, and there is a link in the video description if you fancy getting one of the last remaining tickets for Gracie's in January. Q&A, absolutely, but there are other things that are going to happen that night that are not too radical, JP, but they're a wee bit different from your usual An Audience With evening. There is an interactive element as well, should that be your thing. Patrick Harold, Celtic the Irish Connection. That, I don't know if it was ever released on VHS, but I do have the DVD of that particular production. So we'll get round to that, Patrick. And Kevin Graham, poet, Big Nev's testimonial ties in with the John Joe Kenny Cup. Big Nev's testimonial is in there, actually, and it leads me to mention that because there was 3 testimonial DVDs, right? And I don't know if there's anything before or after the actual 90 minutes of footage, JP, right? So it was Brian Robson testimonial down at Old Trafford, Neville Southall and Ian Rush. So obviously part of the testimonial package was that they would release a video of the game and you would make money from that as well. Because these videos were selling in huge numbers back then, weren't they?
Oh, I mean, testimonials were like the holy grail as a Celtic, for me as a Celtic fan in the kind of mid to late 90s, having known of the testimonials that had taken place before my time as a fan, a match-going fan. So then the opportunity to go to one, I went to, well, he's not exactly a name that is potentially got much popularity attributed to him at the moment, given his court case, ongoing court case. But I went to Ryan Giggs' testimonial, the Man United Celtic when Celtic won 4-3, and that was still to this day one of the best trips I've ever had. You know, arriving in Manchester, sunny day, really hot, just drinking all day, and then I'm pretty sure we had that full stand. I might be wrong. Maybe the mists of time has made me think otherwise, but it felt like we had the whole stand. Maybe we just had the top tier or whatever, but there was a lot of Celtic fans at that game, and it was just brilliant. So yeah, it's just a shame that there's not that many players nowadays that will get testimonials, so that those things won't happen as often as they used to. You know, it was like Mark Hughes, Roy Keane,
Mark Hughes, Brian McClare.
Yeah, Tom Boyd was his testimonial was against Man United at Celtic Park.
Yeah,
we got beat 2-0, I think. That was a Beckham, Scholes, all those guys.
Absolutely. Andy Gorham in goals for Man United.
Was he?
He came on as a sub.
Didn't remember that. That game. Didn't expect to beat Man United at that point. You know, we're not kidding ourselves on. Man United were we did beat them in 2001, I suppose. But I think that was due to the introduction of a lot of new players for them at that point. They signed Van Nistelrooy and Juan Sebastian Veron had come in as well. They all made their debuts in that game. And then
the Man U thing, Danny McGray and Roy Aitken were both Manchester United, their testimonials. Lou McCarry got a testimonial at Man U, played Celtic. And all these games, like my dad and my uncle Chick, who took me to my first game at Celtic Park, they went to all these games. You know, and they talk about like going to Old Trafford to watch the Rapid Vienna playoff. Well, I call it a playoff, the third game, the replay, after the bottle incident at Celtic Park. So the other night there, I'm round at my mum's and in pops Chick, my uncle, and just casually, it was like talking about the Real Madrid game, and my old fella's sitting and they're just talking away, and I says, "Were you guys at the last game in 1980?" And Chick, "Oh, aye, I was at that game, aye." And you know what I mean? You just take it for granted because we went to all the games. I think my dad must have been working back shift, but they didn't walk about wearing it like a badge on. And it's just that's what you did. You went home and away. You went to all the games, so it was good to catch up there. But the testimonial thing, like you say, JP, it's a dying art now. And I think last season we were talking about Nir Beaton and Tommy Rogic getting testimonials. So we're coming into that period. They're now gone. Jamesy Forrest and Callum McGregor, I'm guessing, will be in line for a testimonial. Dare I say Tony Ralston will probably be a one club man. Who knows? I know he's had a few loan deals here and there. Listen to this. For those of a younger persuasion, there was a thing called VHS? Aye, there was. There was also VHS and Betamax, which was the other model of video recorder that you could hire and record on.
There was a third as well, which is what we had in my household.
Was there?
It was called a V2000.
I've never heard of that. I've never heard of the V2000. Like,
I don't know who made it. But it had gigantic tapes, and I'd lay money on the fact that there'll be somebody watching that remembers a V2000.
I need to get my hands on one of these. I wonder if any.
You could never get V2000, or if you did, there was like a very, very small section in the video shop that were V2000. I mean, you're talking about 10 videos or something. And I hired them all out when we got our V2000. The first of which, I believe, was the Kim Basinger, Dan Aykroyd, light-hearted sci-fi comedy, My Stepmother is an Alien, which You know,
Oh, this is nostalgia. Like,
I
this
haven't
is
watched that
brilliant.
for a long, long time. But that and there was another one. I think it was Haunted Honeymoon with Gene Wilder. Uh,
They don't make movies like that anymore, JP. And I know I'm now sounding very old, which I am to a
No,
degree.
but
Rob,
it was a game changer when we did finally get a VHS and bin the V2000, because it was a whole new world that meant I could choose videos from all over the store. So I was straight into like the action section to get like Predator and RoboCop and all that. So
oh, different world, man. I mean, video wars, VHS, Betamax, V2000s. Well, there was actually, Robert, if you look back on that picture, there was a Betamax video in amongst that pile, that bundle. The Celtic story, which was indeed the very first video that Celtic ever released as an official production. And it basically was Celtic's history from 1888 to 1967. I should say 1887 till 1967. And that was the first history video. Thankfully, it was re-released on VHS. We've got that as well. But there was a Betamax. I was having a look at the tape. It was just a different size, this big chunky plastic that we used to use. Now, these things are all gone. We can get everything at our fingertips. Well, you will be able to watch these once we get them up on YouTube.
I mean, I've still got all this. I can't part with this. This is essentially an art exhibition in my flat. You know, it's all this stuff is me. I mean, I will eventually whittle it down, and I'm like slowly but surely, you know, getting albums that mean a lot to me on vinyl rather than have them on CD, just because. You know, it's nice to have the vinyl copy, but it's quite hard to do.
But the thing is, JP, right? There is this whole social aspect around going into somebody's pad and seeing a collection of records, books, CDs, DVD, whatever it is, and straight away there you go, right? You can actually spark up a discussion based on that. You can decide if you're going to like that person based on their records. You don't have that anymore with people that have just got everything digital on their phone or on their device. So, you know, it's something that, as long as guys like you and I keep the nostalgia alive, JP, and there'll be plenty more like us. Brendan Monaghan, loving it, guys, from the Netherlands. Hail, hail, and a hail, hail to you. Anybody who hasn't checked out Brendan, check him out on the socials and on YouTube as well.
Has anybody come on to say about the cars at the side of the pitch at Hampden, why they were there?
I've got Mega Light, and this isn't the cars we're talking about that were kind of like a light blue colour. For people who might have had some kind of handicap and they would be sitting watching the game from the wee blue cars. You're talking proper sized motors.
They were like massive cars that it was as if it was like an auction or something like that at the side of the pitch. And I know that they've done that thing at Celtic Park a couple of times where you've got to smack a ball from the centre circle into an open boot of a car, which, by the way, I think maybe I've spoken about this before, but probably a long time ago, Anthony Stokes did it. Like the people that were taking part in it did it and missed it by miles, as you would imagine. But Anthony Stokes just was like kind of having a look and sort of measuring it up, and he just took a couple of touches and then smacked it, and it just went like that off the top and in, and it stayed in the boot.
Doesn't surprise me about Stokes. I mean, that's a player, JP, that lost, I think, 5 years of a top-flight football career just through his behaviour, his off-field antics. But Stokes, what a talent that boy was, you know, and he's been lost to the game.
Well, speaking of that, have you seen that Twitter video that's been going viral about the guy that he's like a lower league footballer?
I have seen that. Because Mundial sent retweeted it or something.
Aye, my God, that
what
guy.
A player.
The first sort of 20 seconds of watching it, I was like, has someone staged all this?
I know.
And then there was so many different games and different scenarios and like these rubbish wee parks, you know, like that you'd play in.
One of them's like you can see the housing.
You see the houses. That looks like Leith Links actually. It's very similar to Leith Links. There's a pitch at Leith Links that has that kind of housing background in it. But some of the finishes that he puts away, you know, nonchalant, you know, first time volleys from about 30 yards out into the top corner, and then he's even got like, you know, running in on goal and selling the keeper one and then dinking it into the and off the post. There's one was in off the post that's just sweet as a nut.
I know. if he's got a personality, there's a whole world out there in the world of podcasting for him and broadcasting. I can just...
Well, the comments are pretty good. There's people all going like, you just know this guy loves a Greggs and all that, you know. the comments are a little bit harsh, but also...
They are a bit talking about abusing kebabs and Stella. Otherwise, he would have been playing for England or that. I thought that was a bit harsh. Stephen, the Maestro would be worth a look. I remember watching that back in the day, the Maestro video. So absolutely, Stephen, we'll get round to that one. And there's Michael McDonald also talking about the 5-1 game. In goals for Celtic that day, Tony Warner on loan from Liverpool at the time.
And sorry to bring music into it, but they played U2, The Sweetest Thing.
The Sweetest Thing, yeah.
Right at the end of the game, they played The Sweetest Thing as the sort of the last tune, like while everybody was filing out. And I think the Rangers fans were kept in, and what I heard was that they just kept playing the goals, the 5 goals on a loop. And obviously there's all the TVs and the stairwells and everything, so they were all stuck, couldn't get out, had left their seats, but they were in the sort of the foyer areas, and they had all the screens, and they were just playing it whilst also pumping out U2, The Sweetest Thing. Which
that's fair enough. That seems fair to me.
I mean, it was revenge for quite a lot. It happened in the 90s.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Kevin Graham's watching live. What's the Views one? Well, there's a couple in there that I was completely unaware of, and the Celtic Views one is a collection of, I think, Celtic fans who are maybe reciting stories and poems, etc., Kevin. So I don't know if you were on it back in the day, but I don't ever think it was for sale, JP. It was maybe one of these ones that was sent out or given free with a Celtic View or something. I'm not sure.
It's a subscription thing, because Man United used to do like a monthly video where you could subscribe and you'd get like a monthly magazine. I remember I had one, and it had like an interview with Beckham when he was just in the youth team, and I'm sure he had like a poster of Eternal on his wall, which is mental considering he ended up marrying a Spice Girl. But he had, and then it showed him showing off his boots, and he'd written his name, like he'd written Beckham on the back corner of his Adidas boots, and I think it was in like Tipex or something. And then you think he goes on to like probably have an entire range of boots made by Adidas. I wonder if I've never seen that since. I wonder if that's on YouTube just to watch back for the sheer hilarity of the absurdity of the fact there's this wee guy that's just, not got any money yet. He's just in digs at Man United, and then he goes on to become this iconic footballer,
The interesting thing that you were talking about having posters on the wall, there is, and I think it might be on YouTube, some kind of documentary thing that showed a lot of early footage of the Spice Girls. And Victoria Adams was her name, I think. Mm-hmm. She's in her bedroom, and on the wall is a Manchester United player, but it's not David Beckham.
Was it Lee Sharp?
It's Ryan Giggs, man.
All right. Okay.
Check it out. B, Celtic Files was Wim Janssen's season, right? That's great. I will enjoy watching that for sure. Pat Dolan, I'm going to bring this up because I agree with Pat, right? It's high time Celtic put together a HD subscription streaming service. Days of tapes are long gone, so too DVD, Blu-ray. I remember for a while, JP, that you could access Celtic's archive online. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know what it was called, and I don't think it was a subscription basis, but I remember going on and watching things that they had produced for the old Celtic TV when it wasn't even called Celtic TV. What was it called? Something Channel 67?
Yeah, I think you're right.
It was Channel 67. So obviously they produced loads and loads of material, and it's all sitting in a hard drive somewhere. And they made it available for a while, and I don't know if the cost or the running cost was too much, but it was in a superb system. And I was going in and watching wee documentaries they'd made on guys like George Connolly from back in the day that are not available anywhere else. It was called The Lost Boy, the George Connolly story and all that. So Celtic have got a massive archive, and like Pat Dolan says there, they should use it. It should be worked into some kind of membership scheme. It could be part of your worldwide Celtic membership scheme, perhaps. Gary, here we go. Gary Madden, the green and whitewash in there. It is, Gary. It is in there as well, where Chris Sutton's on the front of it, and it's got all the scores underneath. So, yeah, I've not heard No. Stevie Kenny's talking about the other cars that used to be around the park. The one JP's are talking about are genuine, normal-sized motors that used to be on the side of the park, right?
Because
What was
the
the
track
reason
side
for
at
that?
Hampden was big. You know, there was like a huge area between the stand and the pitch, so they were just parked. Yeah.
The worst one I ever saw was in terms of advertising. It was the hot tubs at Falkirk. So in the corner of one of the in the corner of one of the stands, there was a company that installed a massive big hot tub, and like you could pay VIP or something to just sit there with all your mates watching the game and have a few beers. I found it bizarre, but yeah, they did try that.
Just reminded myself there that I'm actually going to Capello tonight to watch the Ton versus Ayr United in the cup. I think it's
Really?
would it be the Challenge Cup or the whatever the cup is called, the Ramsden's Cup, formerly known as the Ramsden's Cup. Anyway, my mate Dave from work just texted me last night and said, got a couple of tickets for the Ton tomorrow night if you would fancy it. So I was just like, why not? I'm going to go and watch Great Morton again. The last time I was there with him, it was against Partick Thistle, and Thistle went 1-0 up, and then Morton equalised, and there was a pitch invasion, and then they scored the winner, and there was another pitch invasion, and Geach was like, I've been coming to see Morton for over 40 years. I've never, ever seen this happen. It's like, I don't know if you've had some sort of influence in this, JP, but like, just all these like wee guys just stormed the pitch going daft because their team had come back to a goal down against Partick Thistle. And the Capello security are kind of standing just going, no, don't come on the pitch. Like, there was no chance they were going to stop a bunch of wee guys running on. I mean, it was like a classroom out of control on a slightly larger scale.
I remember one thing that nobody was ever able to answer, doing some research on Neely Mockin's early career. Obviously, his senior career started at Morton, as they were known back then. It wasn't Greenock Morton. And they flew a flag of Greece on one of the, in fact, it was on the main stand at Capello. And nobody could answer to me the reasons behind that. So I spoke to a couple of Morton historians and they couldn't explain it either. But in the newspaper, it was talking about the fact that they were flying the flag of Greece. And you're talking the 1940s because Neely had national service for a couple of years in between, starting with Morton and then getting transferred to Celtic. Middlesbrough it was, before coming to Celtic. So anybody in the comments, let me know.
I'll ask Geach. He's a Morton historian. He knows.
Is
Oh God, I mean, he's absolute in with the bricks at Capello. He's lifelong Morton fan, and regularly winds me up about the 1-0 Dougie Imrie cup game at Celtic Park, which, I mean, I'm pretty sure Van Dijk played in that game. So
Tommy Rogic played that game for sure.
Yeah. See, before we run out of time, we were going to talk. Well, I thought we were going to talk about Ange Postecoglou and the whole Brendan Rodgers. It's been a
quick hour. It's been a quick hour, JP.
57 minutes as we mentioned Brendan Rodgers, but I was talking. I was right, talk sport. But I saw some article, or someone shared an article about Ange going to Australia, just saying, he shouldn't be away doing this promo, selling tickets for this game in Australia. And no, they should have left that to like Bankier and Nicholson to go and do that rather than Ange Postecoglou. I mean, it's the international week. Nothing was mentioned in that article about the fact that it's international week and quite a lot of the players are away. And I don't really think Ange has gone over there with a gun to his head, like, oh, you must go over and do this, it's part of your job or something like that. He's not been to Australia for like 3 years. Should have given the opportunity to go back for however long he's there for, 3-4 days. He's not going to be upset about that. Him and did Harry Kewell go as well?
The thing is, JP, right? You've got to remember when the contracts are signed on things like this may have been part of the conditions, right? So you do the press junkets. It's not like Ange Postecoglou turns up and there's a line of press there just by chance. I mean, he's been on radio, he's been on TV, he's done the whole thing, right? So I'm pretty sure that had been written into the contract that Celtic signed in and around the Sydney Cup as part of the promo for the event. You're promoting an event in Australia. You've got an Australian manager. Of course, he's going to be the guy that's representing the club. There's an international break. There's a perfect time for that to happen. Mm-hmm. So anybody that's got an issue with that, you've just got to question the motives behind it. Because what's the issue? What is the issue with Ange doing it?
I don't know. I did like his comment about I just lost my first game in a year, so I had to get out of the country. That's what he said. I mean, I'm not making light of the fact that we lost the game because I'm still not really over that because it just was a spectacular collapse. I did say last week, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I remember sitting there talking to you while I was in Spain saying you can't just think that you've got the 3 points for this game already and that it would potentially be a bit of a stuffy afternoon as it proved to be. I didn't think we would get beat 2-0. I mean, I don't think anybody would have predicted that. I thought maybe it would be like a draw. That might be what we would come away with. And a draw would have been a damaging result as well. But just you could tell from the tempo in the first 10-15 that it wasn't quite right. And not everybody was at it.
And then trying to change the tempo is going to be very difficult, especially for the substitutes coming on, JP.
The changes as well. It just my stream kept cutting out and it would cut back and there'd be another new face on the pitch and you'd be like, my God, this is it's so disjointed. It's like trying to put into the team what should have been there from the start. You go back and look at it and you're like, we've gone into an international break. We missed a game the weekend before. Why make so many changes? I know we're not football managers and I'm sure Ange Postecoglou has probably gone through this in his own head and been like, well, maybe I made too many changes. Looked at the Ross County game in Dingwall and thought, well, I made 9 there and got away with a 4-1. So he didn't obviously bank on St Mirren being so committed and organised. I was speaking to a guy at work last night he's a Rangers fan and he just sort of laughed and he was like, that was a Curtis Main masterclass for the last 20-25 minutes, wasn't it? And I was like, I mean, that's mental that we're saying that a guy is being described as having had a masterclass against Celtic, a guy who's an SPFL journeyman essentially who's been around, and I don't know where he went out with Scotland, but he's obviously back and he's at St Mirren, and the amount of times the camera cut to him after he'd shielded the ball at a corner or eating up some time with something else. I mean, it's a bit much. It's a bit of a stretch to call it a masterclass, but he did do really well and saw out the game for them. Quite confidently. So, but just to touch on the Ange Postecoglou, Brighton, Leicester, whoever is the latest club to be linked with him, he's come out and shut it down. I really just think that it's now going to be the case that he's probably going to get linked with anybody. Any job that comes up, he's going to get linked with just because he's a name and he's made waves. He's quite popular in the media and is a popular guy. And there's definitely a story there that journalists will be like, oh well, he can take what he's done at Celtic and do that at another club in England. But I don't think we're in a Brendan Rodgers situation here. I hope that doesn't come back to bite me, but I really don't think that we're in a situation where he's going to suddenly be standing in a Leicester City suit at the side of being walked around the pitch side. I just don't see that happening. No,
and you're right. The warning signs were there with Brendan Rodgers. They talk about going to take this big contract in China, remember, and taking Dembele with him and all this kind of stuff. And the rumour mill from good sources made you wonder what his intentions were. So, yes, it was a shock when it happened, but there were warning signs prior to that about the character of Brendan Rodgers, which is a different kind of character than Ange Postecoglou. The loudest roar looks interesting. Yes, it does. I think it was done for the 25th, maybe the 25th anniversary of Lisbon. So we'll have a look at all of these. And Paul wants to know if you've got the V2000 at the bars.
I mean, I can't tell you. I'm going to actually have a wee quick Google of it as we're wrapping up, but I can't tell you much about it other than it was about in the sort of mid-80s, and it was a gigantic video And there it is. Oh my God, there's a picture of it. Video 2000 or V2000 is a consumer video cassette system and analog recording standard developed by Philips and Grundig to compete with JVC's VHS and Sony's Betamax video technologies.
I didn't know Sony were behind the Betamax. There you go.
Learn something new every
You
day.
always do it. Not always about Celtic, but you will learn something on Thursday's edition of the Acsom Bulletin. JP, yeah, we could have dug in a wee bit more on the comments around Ange, but I think that we did cover quite a lot of bases there, and it's always an absolute pleasure. Keep the comments coming in, and as I say, we will be covering the retro videos on the channel very, very soon. We'll have another one up next week, and we'll keep them coming because we have been nominated, JP, again for Football Content Awards, and this time it's for Best in Videos, so we're going to make a few videos just to make you decide whether or not you think we deserve a vote, and if you do think that we deserve a vote, give us one, and you've got a wee link underneath the video. We're going down to Manchester to represent Acsom, and hopefully we can come back up with another gong. Thanks everybody for getting involved in the comments, it's always a pleasure, and thank you once again to JP Mason for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Paul.